This is the third in a series of intimate conversations we've hosted here with our dear friend and colleague, Barbara London. And for each, we've asked her to invite an artist she has worked with and admired throughout her remarkable career. So the first of these conversations happened a little over a year ago, and it was with performance pioneer Joan Jonas, the second with film and video artist Charles Atlas, and tonight we're thrilled to welcome artist Christine Sun Kim. Together, the two will dive into Kim's ongoing artistic investigation of the way sound operates in society, looking closely at some of Christine's key projects over the years, all the way up through her most recent performance of the national anthem and America the Beautiful in American Sign Language at this past Sunday's Super Bowl. And following the conversation today, there'll be plenty of opportunities for you all to ask questions and engage with the two of them. But before we get started, I'd like to share a bit of information about the space and do an access check. So please let us know if you need anything. Please feel free to prioritize your comfort. Get up, walk around if you need to, get some fresh air. We also have if you need a quieter space, the bar area now will be more quiet that you're all in here, and our office is also open. In both spaces, we'll have screens so you can watch the event via live stream as well. There are all gender restrooms if you exit through this door and take a left. And also, in an effort to increase access to tonight's event, we have cart transcription, which you can see behind me. And I want to give a shout out to the wonderful Josh Edwards, who captures every word perfectly. And we also have a fantastic team of ASL interpreters this evening. So we have Beth and Denise, who will be supporting Christine and Barbara's conversation, as well as Grayson and Maria. Maria's right behind me now, who will provide interpretation for folks in the audience. So let's all give them a warm welcome and thank you. And lastly, as you all know, due to our delay, we are live streaming tonight's event for archival purposes and also to increase access to our remote viewers. So if you don't want to be on camera for any reason at all tonight, just please flag down an Eyebeam staff member and let us know. So many thanks again to our speakers tonight, as well as the wonderful Eyebeam team for making tonight's event possible. And please now join me in welcoming Barbara London and Christine Sun Kim.
So it's great to be here. Eyebeam is a phenomenal organization, and I'm delighted for the introduction of Sally and Jay Soto and the wonderful tech team, Marley, and I forget now, several others are here as well. Poltergeists do live in equipment, and that's what happens. So we're very lucky that Christine is in the country now. She just opened her exhibition at MIT's Liss Visual Arts Center in Cambridge last night. So Christine has forged quite a distinctive path as an artist over the last 10, 15 years. And her work takes quite a few different forms. It can be drawing, performance, installation, video. And I'm going to start with how we met. Let's see.
Another technical difficulty.
Am I doing something wrong? It's this one? All right. So we're talking about sound. So sound is a very gnarly, fluid thing. So the sound and its absence is, part of our conversation today. So maybe I'm aiming this at the wrong thing. Okay, so I met Christine in 2012 when I was putting together an exhibition called Soundings, a Contemporary Score. I did several years of research to come up with artists as I was creating the exhibition. So I went to her studio in Chinatown, and I discovered quite exciting work. And I put in these two drawings. And those of you who are signers know that it's the drawing, the sign for all day and all night. And maybe what you can't see here, but you can if you were standing in front of it, is that there's musical notation and there's also words. So drawing over the years has been certainly a big part of her practice. So I want to now start to get Christine to engage. So recently I read that you were a high energy kid and that your mother sometimes would distract you by drawing pumpkins on a napkin. So maybe you could go into a little bit about how you have a supportive family and, sort of maybe how that shaped your practice. And then we'll go on to your studies.
Sure. Well, Sunday church was a big thing for our family. I remember they would often give us books where we would, you could copy a picture or trace or draw a picture. There were a lot of, white men, a lot of different stories about Noah from the Bible, the animals on the ark, and we would draw the rainbow. And these were different activities that we did at church, but that really actually had a strong influence on me because I've been drawing for many years. I really never stopped. And when I went to Bard College, I made these two drawings that you see here during my last summer there. I think I had a really good meeting with a painter by the name of Amy Silman, and she made a few comments that really stuck with me. I felt like, okay, validated. It's okay for me to draw. So I kind of went back to doing that more in my practice.
So you did undergraduate in Rochester, then you did studio practice in SVA, and then you went to Bard. And let's see. Whoops,
Yes,
I didn't want to
yes.
go quite there yet. Okay, well, we'll do this. We'll do the video. That's what I really wanted. I wanted you to talk about Cage and the idea of silence and how people like me who are hearing, we often associate silence with deafness. So maybe you could talk a little bit about Cage and your practice.
Well, when I started looking more into sound and using it in my work, I really had to go back to basics and ask them simple questions. What does sound mean to me? Not from a hearing perspective, but maybe from a deaf perspective. And what is silence? It's interesting growing up in a world where they impose their ideas on what things mean to them, and they put that on us as deaf individuals. I wanted to unlearn all of that. And at Bard, I felt like, showing up in the music department like, hey everyone, here I am. They were these serious students, had studied classical music, and they weren't used to having someone like me there. So I struggled at first and realized silence it really doesn't mean anything to me. So we read about John Cage, and they were using sound to shape silence. It's kind of a very basic thought. But what I did appreciate about Cage's work, he broke every barrier, he broke all the rules. And he noticed that silence is like a kind of sound. And I was feeling right, exactly, I feel the same way. And I kind of use that as a jumping off point.
So now we'll go to, she did a TED Talk, which is pretty amazing. And so maybe we'll do you want to say anything about the TED Talk, and then we'll play the 1 minute? Yeah.
Yes, sure. Well, we were just speaking before we came in here for the conversation. And if it wasn't for the MoMA invitation to be part of that show, I don't think I would have gotten this fellowship at TED. Because when I started creating art as my career, I know they didn't really have a lot of room for artists in the TED community. So it was kind of this weird mix. I asked myself, what kind of platform do I want? And then MoMA gave me this opportunity, and then I felt like, okay, this was a great balancing act for me to be able to go from there and into the TED Fellowship. It was kind of one of the few first non-art platforms for me. And it kind of defined clearly for me my deaf ideas in an easier way that a larger audience could understand. People that weren't deaf and who weren't artists. TED taught me how to define and explain my work and to clearly share my thoughts and ideas. And I was fascinated with the idea of, art can mean multiple things. It doesn't have to be just one thing. And I've used that in my practice.
Okay. So we'll roll it. We'll just do about a minute, I'll say.
Piano, P, is my favorite musical symbol. It means to play softly. If you're playing a musical instrument and you notice a P in the score, you need to play softer. 2 Ps, even softer. 4 Ps, extremely soft. This is my drawing of a P tree, which demonstrates no matter how many thousands upon thousands of Ps there may be, you'll never reach complete silence. That's my current definition of silence, a very obscure sound. I'd like to share a little bit about the history of American Sign Language, ASL, plus a bit of my own background. French Sign Language was brought to America during the early 1800s, and as time went by, mixed with local signs, it evolved into the language we know today as ASL. So it has a history of about 200 years.
The girl that's here today.
I was born deaf, and I was taught to believe that sound wasn't a part of my life. And I believed it to be true. Yet, I realize now that that wasn't the case at all. Sound was very much a part of my life, really on my mind every day.
So maybe we'll cut. Is this, do you want to do?
Can I just add a little something to this?
Add a little something.
Yeah, to this TED Talk. I never experienced, we trained and practiced and rehearsed this script so many times. They gave me a voice, can you imagine? And then they gave the microphone to Denise. And then all the attention was over directed at her. But it was interesting, and it was an interesting experience. And during the talk, I forgot my lines twice. I was just so nervous. Fortunately, they edited that part out, and it looks so smooth. It was nerve-wracking.
Cool. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Okay, so I just thought Christine is here, and here she is in the slide, and there's this drawing, a great drawing, why she doesn't read lips. Signing is very much part of her life, and then maybe later we'll get into a little bit of the politics behind that. Oops. So here we are. She's done many great performances, and I thought it might be interesting just to see an example, and then we can talk about it. We're just going to do about a minute. Okay. Oops. I think that's enough. That's good. So,
Should I talk a little about that?
yeah, for sure.
Face opera? Well, this is a deaf group of individuals. That was kind of my first time working with a group of deaf friends. And you'll see that appear more and more in my work as my career progressed. So face opera, I had the idea of using American Sign Language. And you know, a lot of the language, the grammar is, and the tone, all these different parameters of the language are shown on the face. Lots of people think it's the hands, the manual part is more important, but the facial expression is so important. So in this piece, we asked the singers to keep their hands in their pockets and to sing with their face.
I know that there are other performances that you did where it was performers moving, and one was instructed and the next one learned by the vibration of their voice. I don't remember what that means. Anyway.
Yeah, that was the face opera piece. That was another part of the work.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Where I allowed the deaf voice to come out.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really a very political, and there's so many different layers to that, oppression, years of oppression, and years, all of that kind of political nonsense, that some of them didn't feel comfortable using their voice. Because once they put their voice out there, they kind of lose the control over it. They put that out into the air, the world, and some of them felt, I don't feel comfortable being vulnerable in that state. When you get to the point where maybe you feel comfortable in that space, some of them did, some of them don't. So I want to make sure in my work I develop a safe space where people can be free to do what they want and make it less politicized, even though sometimes it's not always the case.
So maybe we'll move on to this piece and we can talk a little bit about it, because this is where the public comes in and has to, it's almost like playing a video game. They've got to have dexterity.
Yes, yes. This is called Game of Skill. I worked with Levi Lorenzo. He's an amazing tech guy. He really helped me a lot on this project. And he's based here in New York. It's kind of, the idea was like a turntable. When the needle touches the record, and then the music will play. That's the idea behind the way this game of skill works. And the concept behind it was for people who are not deaf, no. Deaf individuals have a variety of different experiences. Some of them lip read, some of them write back and forth, various ways of communicating. Where hearing individuals, they kind of already have a set system that they use. And maybe they don't have as many different skills in regards to hearing and listening as deaf people do. So I wanted to challenge that. And so challenge all these different ways of listening or hearing. And that's what this game of skill did, where I forced you to develop a new skill, a new ability to be able to listen. And if so, you felt like, oh yeah, I accomplished this, I won the game. So I wrote a text, I don't even remember what it was about. And I had somebody voice that text, and it was a curator who I had, who provided access to this voice. And it was in the device that they're holding, in that console. And the wire, the antenna would have to touch the wire that's running across the room. If they went fast, the voice would come out fast. They walked slow, it would be slow. And if for some reason the antenna disconnected from the wire, there was no sound played at all. If they walked in reverse, then you would hear it played in reverse. So people would go and try again and again and again to listen and to see if they could get the whole sentence to play out. It was almost like they won an award if they were finally able to accomplish that.
Like winning, winning a video game or winning a, let's see what we did next. We'll just go next. So then I learned that Christine, we really hadn't seen each other in several years. I learned that she had moved to Berlin. And many artists go to Berlin, rents are cheap. But I think it's great that she found he's very happy there. So anyway, it's great just to see this. It's almost like that's her studio sharing information on space. And there she is, that's where she works, where she does some of the work. Let's see what I want to do. Ask you about this. So her life partner is Thomas Mader, and you've collaborated sometimes, or actually quite often. So maybe you could talk a little bit about...
Yeah, the last project was our daughter.
What?
The last project we worked on was our daughter.
Yeah. That's a family affair.
Exactly. This piece here, this video, should I talk about it, or did you have
Yeah, sure.
something
Yeah,
else?
we'll play it because we have it here. Or do you want to talk about it after? You choose.
Yeah, you can play it and then we'll talk about it.
Okay, so we'll run it.
%, 100% relatable. This is the worst.
Great. So, should we cut? Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
So, Thomas has learned, of course, sign language, signing, and
Yes.
how did you collaborate on that? It's almost like a Charlie Chaplin.
So when we met, he started learning sign language. And he has a very German face. So I'm like, come on, can you move your eyebrows? Move your cheeks. Are you mad? What are you trying to tell me? So we would have these little arguments often, but he's gotten much better with facial expression. So this is kind of a little bit like a game, the arm game. It's big in the deaf community. You put your arms through, like as you saw in the video. And it's kind of a skill using my hands and his face and trying to match the two together. So we decided it didn't look good to have him in front and have him do the facial expression. Better to have the white male in the back. Yeah, for political reasons too, but really conceptually it would have been nice if we could have had his face there. But it just was not, it was an awkward fit. And in the video, for those who don't know, that one index finger is representative of a person. And it's interesting how with the different facial expressions, it can really, these small nuances can change the meanings of how these two people in this story are interacting. So we were playing that game to express that aspect of ASL.
So it's lovely. So I'm curious then, as a video, have you shown it in museums, in galleries? You've gotten it out into the world. It's on your website.
It's shown in a few gallery spaces, just like this one has.
Right.
Knoxville.
The Albright Knox up in Buffalo.
Knox.
Yeah.
Yes, that one, sorry.
Yeah. So this was a pretty big, this was a mini retrospective, the Albright Knox show?
Our first kind of, first time the two of us to have our stuff there, our little video here in the gallery space there. So we were excited about that.
Some of you may have been to the Albright Knox. It's a really great museum with a fantastic early 20th century painting collection, and it's quite encyclopedic. And it's got a very, very interesting curatorial team. So that's pretty great. So then other works that you've done. So you could talk a little bit about this.
Yeah. This is called Looky Looky. So I'm going to show, you see here what I'm doing with my tongue? Deaf people are really good at it. So there was a small group of signers, a small group of ASL. We weren't using our manual hands in this part of it. Thank you. Interpreter correction. I'll say this again. We have a small group of signs in ASL that don't require your hands. It's just on your face. These are called non-manual markers or non-manual signals. So you can see in the frame where we're looking at each other, it's a complete conversation that's going on, but it's only happening through facial expression, through these non-manual markers. And I've added the captions to convey the meaning. Where it says on the bottom left, you don't have to tell me. And this is what it's like. I'll demonstrate what's happening in the video. And the upper left one is, look at that person on your left. So it was a funny conversation to have side by side in these videos. Yeah.
This is great. So let's see. We'll go on.
Oh, I think that's interesting that I was working more and more focusing on sound. I felt like it gave me, well, strangely enough, working with sound gave me many voices and ways to work with sign language interpreters as well. And it became a large, different themes, language and communication were big themes in my work. Before I was working more maybe with music and sound, and then this is kind of a shift in my work.
So I think we'll move on one more slide. Then you started to do really big drawings. So billboard size. So this was adjacent to the Whitney in 2018.
Yes.
So was that your first billboard?
Yeah, my first one. I never thought something like this would happen. Jeannie Goldstein, the curator at the Whitney, she asked me, would you like to be in the next billboard? And that time I had just had my daughter. So I was feeling like, I took one of my older drawings that was part of a different series. And I'll demonstrate to the audience here how to sign future. It's two arches, if you follow my hand. So notice how I made the lines so thick. It's kind of holding a lot of anxiety. This is when Trump won the presidency, and I felt like it was perfectly fitting at this time to draw something like that. And so that's where that drawing came from, and that's what they created into this billboard.
No, it's effective. So go one
Yeah.
more. Go one more, let's see. So then, and I actually don't know these people in Missouri, but I was wondering, is this part of a museum exhibition?
Really, nobody does.
What?
Nobody knows them. It's a large project done all over. Different artists contributed different works, and these billboards are up and over in many states. It was really a fabulous project for freedoms.
That's great. So we'll go one more. And then we've already seen that you've worked with the musical notation and the silence and then loud. So you do drawings. Is that what you do often?
I wanted to show one drawing with musical notation. And I often use that as a way to measure a period of time that's passing, like a period of time that you're waiting, or a period, maybe a full day. I'll use these musical notations to convey or express a period of passing time. So this may be as I'm waiting in line at a bank. It gives you some anxiety. You see, the more P's, the more frustrated you are. I'm waiting longer and longer and longer. It's a musical symbol, a note, almost like an emotion, a passing of time. That's what I was trying to convey.
But when you see these drawings in person, they're really beautiful. They're really, really engaging. So we'll go one more. So Christine was in the Whitney Biennial 2019.
No, she's just noting that the comments on the slices of the pie, they're hard to read.
Right. It's a little blurry, but this was one of the drawings from the Whitney Biennial, right?
No.
No. Okay.
This is the newest one up at MIT.
Oh, okay.
Just yesterday.
Okay. So it's very hard for us. Do you remember what you wrote there with the quadrants, with the pie slices?
Well, I remember, let's see.
Oh, she's
You know
got
when
it on her
people come
phone.
up to you on
Here.
the street? You know when, oh,
Jay
you have
has it
on
right
the
there.
phone? To avoid being solicited for special treatment. I'm just going to read it from the
Okay.
phone. During a bus ride with an elderly woman who can't stop talking to me. That bus part, I felt, I was literally on a bus that was on 14th Street. I got on, and there was a woman sitting there looking at me. And I thought, maybe I missed my stop. And then I got up, and then I realized, I was okay. And then she started speaking to me, and on and on and on and on. And I realized, I guess she needed somebody to talk to. So I let her talk to me, and I nodded my head in agreement. I just, yeah, I hear you. Oh my gosh. I gestured towards her, and then finally the stop came, and I waved to her, and I'm like, bye. And I get off the bus. It was a moment where I just wanted, she wanted to talk, so I let her. So the last one that's over in the far left-hand corner says, when I see deaf people, I don't know on the subway. So again, for the audience, if they missed that, it says, when I see deaf people, I don't know on the subway. And the deaf community is so small that sometimes you run into somebody and they'll be like, where are you from? What school did you go to? Who are your parents? And there'll be moments where you're like, I'm not in the mood. I just want to be left alone. So you know what? I pretend to be hearing and I walk away.
That's cute.
Thank you.
So we'll go one more.
Do you need
So
to come
then-
back? Maybe you can have it ready for the next one. Perfect.
So this, caught the attention of a lot of people at the Whitney Biennial, because it was very, obviously it's got, it's political, but it's really beautifully executed, very provocative, and I have to, yeah.
Thank you. My Bard MFA. Bard. Well, at that time, I was not used to being around so many hearing students, and it was difficult to handle that situation. They gave me a hard time for wanting to have 2 full-time interpreters. They're like, what do you need that for? Oh, you don't need that. You could just, use Siri or, get information that way. The last summer, I almost lost my shit because it really affected my creative process. I'm not saying that, shit about my life, but in regards to my learning and education, the attitude, it affected me so much that they gave me. So hopefully they won't do that, or anybody here will ever do that if you run a project. Give the accommodations that the deaf person needs. Guggenheim Accessibility Manager. That one, then Bard FMA, we did that. Visiting artists who aren't comfortable with interpreters. Museums with 0 deaf programming and no deaf docents or educators. Curators who think it's fair to split my fee with the interpreter. Rijksmuseum, the front desk manager. I think I got them all.
Okay. So Christine often talks about the importance of the interpreters, and you both have worked, or I guess several of you have worked with her quite a lot, and there's this element of trust that you talk about that is very special.
Yes. I'm really lucky with all the traveling to develop my own core group or team of interpreters. I'd have to say worldwide. I will soon fly to the University of Northern Texas, and I'm working with an interpreter from LA. And then I'm going on to the University of Toronto, and I'm working for an interpreter who's coming in from Chicago. So I just went to the Super Bowl with Beth, who's here next to Barbara. And so I work with a team, and it's really come together well. Interpreters, they have to work for many years. We have to develop trust. And my voice, it's like my voice and their voice melded together to become one. It's almost like dating. And what's interesting about Deaf Rage, this work here, in the beginning of my career as an artist, I didn't want to open up. I was a little bit fearful that people would pigeonhole me, and I really wanted to be able to do whatever I wanted, discuss any issues that were out there that I wanted to think about. And after this Bard MFA, this anti-deaf kind of thought process and going through all these feelings, I became stronger and stronger and felt, I had a platform now, and I had offerings, things that were out there, and I felt more free. And I was finally at a place where I felt comfortable sharing my deaf experience. So that's what this is about.
So we'll go one more. Oops. So we'll play with this. Wait.
Yeah, this was a performance I did at the Whitney, 5-finger discount. I was trying to take back history, our deaf history. And there were 5 different chapters or stories. It was almost like a sky dance with my partner. He helped to create the dancing figure that you'll see in the talk that I gave here at the Whitney.
Okay, we'll play.
So 5-finger discount history. This is going to be a crash course, so to say, in deaf history. The character here, interesting character by the name of Quasimodo. When you take those 2 words and separate them, quasi meaning almost and modo meaning mute in Spanish. So almost mute.
the idea of mute being connected with all these other notions of negative connotations, and all these things wrapped into one. So I want to kind of reinterpret this into a positive connotation, the same way the word queer has been brought back into the community and looked at in a positive way. I would like deaf and dumb to be looked at in the same manner.
So I just put this up because I think Jerry Saltz, who used to be writing for the Times and writing a lot as a blog, but I just thought she was really acknowledged and taken very, very, very seriously, and I think it's great. It's a sort of testimonial to how important she is as an artist.
Should I read it out loud for access? Just for people who can't maybe
Well, can
see
people
it in the
see
back?
it? It's really, I can say, if you want another kind of blasting indictment, look no farther than Christine Sun Kim's affecting 6-part exploration of her own deaf rage. Formally, the work resembles large-scale Robert Smithson, Mel Bachner, or Richard Serra charcoal drawings, but Kim uses her graphs and words to record degrees of her fury, from acute rage to legit rage to full-on rage, as there being no interpreters at meetings and fake interpreters on TV, at her family not learning sign language, at fast food cashiers, at airplane movies without captions, at Uber drivers calling rather than texting, and so much more that your heart will break. It makes you want a requirement forcing all public schools to teach students at least 150 words of sign language. That's pretty strong.
Yeah.
We'll go one more. So this is, I think, a beautiful piece. I will see it in a couple of weeks. I couldn't go up yesterday for the opening at MIT. But the piece is a beautiful idea. Her daughter is now 2.5, so 1 week of lullabies for Rue. So I gather you had many of your friends sing lullabies and use very basal sounds, and that's what the viewer, listener hears. So maybe you can say a word or two, or?
Sure. I made this in 2017, 2018. I got a baby monitor and set up the camera in my daughter's room. And I noticed they had the ability to play lullabies. That was a feature on the monitor. If she was crying, you could press this button and hopefully the lullaby would lull her back to sleep. But I didn't like the idea of pressing that feature and having no control over, well, what lullaby is being played to her? And control was something that was important to me. So I decided to write a score, and I reached out to 7 artists who were parents. They had children of varying ages. And there were no lyrics. These are different parameters I put in the score, low frequency, things like that. And all of these 7 parents sent me a sound file along with a description of the sound. So to make the sound file conceptually accurate, accessible to individuals who couldn't actually hear it. So I decided to work with the MIT team, and they created this bench here that you see. It's like a pillbox, and it represents the 7 days of the week, Monday to Sunday. And I was thinking about the colors that I would choose for this bench, and that brought me back to the monitor. When the monitor is disconnected, it displays red on the screen. So that's why it starts with red on the left, like Monday is red. And then you see the color palette to the end cushion, which is purple, and that signifies when the monitor is hooked up and working right, the display is purple. So we worked with that color scheme from red to purple. This also has 12 different drawings in the space. And these are personal decisions that I make as a deaf person. Why I watch closed captions, shit hearing people say to me, why my hearing parents sign, and such. Those are the drawings that are in this show.
So we all should make a field trip and go see your show. So another.
We can all support Eyebeam and go together.
So another, I forget where this is.
It's in London. It's still up till
Okay.
June. Should I talk a little bit about it?
Yeah.
So interestingly, King's Cross, which is a little bit north of this area, it's a shopping area, and just behind this, there's a school for the deaf. So I went and visited them, met these really cute little deaf kids. They use British Sign Language there. So I worked with an interpreter when I visited them, and we had these conversations. The kids often repeated the same thing. They were saying, next door there was another school, a public school. And they're like, we really wish that we could go play with those kids. If only they knew sign language, then we could hang out with them and play games together. And I felt like I remember exactly how I felt when I was young. I went through the same thing. It's like, darn it all, if only they signed. And then maybe a year later, the attitude changed, and that really sucked. So 30 years later, the attitude is exactly the same. Nothing has changed. And that really sucks. So that's what you see here. The sentence says, I was encouraging people to, honestly, I think about if sign language was equal, it would lead to better access, better quality of life, access to education, the ability to get jobs, everything would be better. Exactly. Amen to that. So I'm happy they left it up, and it's going to be there till June, so it'll be there actually for a full year.
Great. So let's see, one more. So some of you know that Christine was invited to do the signing for the national anthem. And I think it's quite important that she really took it on and has often, when she's interviewed, talked about how her identity and career is really a product of the Americans with Disabilities Act, that she had signers in school and at university. So in a way, it was kind of a beautiful tribute. So maybe you want to say a word, if you want to say a word.
Yeah. I want to start off by saying no matter, criticism there is about me saying, not enough accessibility, there's still a lot of work to do. But at the same time, when you look at other countries out there, the United States is really the best place to be. We have a lot of opportunities, things that are available to us. So I did a lot of thinking. There are some serious deaf issues in the deaf community, not enough mental health services, abuse from the police. How can we best bring attention to these issues? So that's part of the reason why I accepted to do the anthem. But at the same time, I'm so proud of being an American. I'm very patriotic, and I wanted to sign and perform this anthem as a privilege and also as a deaf individual. And the platform itself, wow, it's really so complicated. But I went with this opportunity, and I wrote an article about the experience. And my experience being there at the Super Bowl really was positive and a little eye-opening. I'm not really a performer. I'm not big on signing songs. But the anthem, I did so much research trying to understand every lyric, every word, and worked so hard on that translation. I had a few deaf friends help me out with working on that translation to get it to be the best it could. And the most difficult part was trying to stay in line with the person who was actually singing the song. I had different cues to know, oh, she's still holding that note. Keep it going, keep it going. Okay, move on to the next line. So keeping in pace and in rhythm with the singer was not, Shed His grace. Okay, is she still holding that note, Grace? Okay, move on forward from there. So that was really challenging. It was a great experience, and I'm happy it seemed to get press and bring attention to the issues that are there in the deaf community, and that's really what's most important to me.
Well, great. So I think maybe we'll end on that note. I was going to show one slide and the next one, and some of you don't know Laurie Anderson, and I realize I'm older than many of you in the room. But for me, when my career was starting off, Laurie Anderson really understood that she had a platform, that she, as an artist, was moving over into and addressing popular culture. And she really did various performances that really attacked the NEA for their huge budget cuts and really took stands. So that's what I see. This is a young generation of someone who's so deeply committed, and I applaud you. So, yeah. So I think we'll close with that.
Thank you.
And maybe take some questions from the audience. We have wonderful
Don't be shy.
signers who are here for everybody's benefit.
Someone with raising a hand? No?
Hello, thanks a lot for it was amazing. I've been looking at your work for many years, and for me, because I'm French, it couldn't make. I wanted to know how do you think it is in France to speak about you being deaf, because I come from a suburb where you can't be queer, you have to be really normative, you have to be normal. The art world is really normative, really heterosexual, really white. And I just arrived in New York and I realized that here you have the right to be different, and actually you can be proud and you can tell your story. And now your work makes so much more sense for me. So now I wanted to ask you what it is. What do you think about Paris? Like making an exhibition in France, how does it feel for you?
The perspective on the art world in Paris, is that what you're speaking about?
Yes.
Could you clarify? Is that what you mean?
Yes, exactly.
I'm not very involved with the art scene there, but I can speak about my experience as a deaf individual. American Sign Language actually comes from France. That's where its roots are. And I've always admired and looked up to the beauty of French Sign Language. It's like a dream. It's in such a beautiful way. Visually, it's so beautiful. And it's very inspiring. And I think the French are great with that. In general, I can comment on the situation in Europe and what's happening with Brexit. The situation that's happening there, they're closing the boundaries. And now with the coronavirus happening, it's scary. There's no country really that's free from any of this, that can work together. Any reason, any situation comes up, and racism seems to be at the fore. And it makes me angry. That's how my current view is. It's not just France, I think it's, all over Europe. And what can we do next? With the politics that are happening now and the way they're being handled, that's scary too. So, I don't know. That's all I guess I can say about that.
Thank you. Another question?
Hi, I wanted to go back more to your art practice and...
Would you mind standing just so I can see the
sorry.
face that goes with the voice? Thank you.
I have a question more about your art practice and the early days of it, because you, I think, mentioned drawing at first, and I wanted to know if you ever started painting or outside of the performances when it comes to, wall pieces, if you ever experimented with other mediums than charcoal or at least more like visual references.
When I went to SVA for studio art, that's where Jerry Saltz was. He was one of my teachers. So at that time, I didn't want to talk about these deaf issues. I just wanted to draw and to work with paint and different motifs and to kind of tell these different narratives. So that's where I was working when I was in school there. I didn't feel I didn't feel satisfied there, so then I shifted and I took a focus in sound. And what was interesting about that was sound is very unstable. It can't be touched, it's untangible. And at the same time, I'm using my own language, American Sign Language, with my hands, and it's very physical. And sound was like, okay, what is it? What does this mean? And then I realized, I was ready to go back to drawing again. So then my work took another shift. Then I decided to kind of do everything.
If anyone has questions, feel free to raise your hand, and we have interpreters as well.
Yeah, so I'm just,
Oh yeah,
See
would
me?
you mind standing too so everybody could see you? Thanks.
great, I just want to make sure everyone can see me. Okay, great, perfect. So I feel so honored to have met you. I've just read a lot of your different, just looked at a lot of different, your art that you have and just things and the meaning, so much meaning behind of a lot of things that you do. It just really shows deaf culture and deaf language and the deaf experience. Just how much you incorporate that into your art, as well as like the sign language community. Just the translation of the anthem was just absolutely a beautiful, beautiful translation. You also, obviously you proved that you are very expressive in just your signing as well, your art, but also in your signing. And just that translation, it wasn't necessarily English, it was actually just a completely different sign language, and it was just so moving. I would love, would you consider doing more of that work? I'm really looking forward to everything you're doing in the future.
Really, I really believe that the anthem was my first and last music signing a song. It's not for me, really, no. I'm being honest here. I feel the deaf community has just amazing group of small poets and individual people who are legit to be working in this venue. So I think that just because I signed a song, of course it was a way to get a lot of attention in a hearing context, but hearing loved that shit, right? But really, I think there are deaf poets out there and people who are a lot more qualified to do this than I am. So I don't know, maybe I'm really pretty sure it's going to be my last time, but who knows?
Hi. I just wondered how it happened that you ended up doing that performance or interpretation.
Many people don't realize that the NAD, the National Association for the Deaf, is the oldest civil rights organization in America, the oldest. And they started working in partnership with the NFL and using the NFL's platform. So both the NFL and the NAD, they work together to identify and choose individuals on a yearly basis who they fit is a good fit, what's happening in the current stream of time to represent the deaf community. So they asked me this year. Well, they actually asked me last year in October, and I was kind of puzzled and shocked. They're like, do you have any videos of yourself? I'm like, okay, I'll give a stab at this. And I signed it and sent it out, but then we'll work together on that. But you got it, you got the job, so to speak. So I was excited about that. And then the NAD, this is a project that they do every year. They choose someone from the deaf community to sign the anthem at the NFL at the Super Bowl.
So we have time for about 2 more questions.
Hi again. I feel like your work is very generous in how it explains the deaf experience to all kinds of audience, and I was wondering if you've always felt that way and always wanted to almost translate to hearing people what it's like to be in your shoes.
I ask myself that question all the time. How much am I making myself understandable without compromising my ideas, my integrity, without making it more, how do I say, hearing? And yet still having people look at me and understand what I'm trying to say, my concepts clearly. I try to use humor a lot in my work, and I feel like humor is a good tool. It kind of breaks the ice, makes people laugh, and then they're like, oh, yeah, that's a heavy, situation you're talking about, because it carries and holds a lot of emotion. So I think that my best strategy as of yet is to use humor in my work.
One last one.
Is it on? Oh. Thank you so much for sharing your work. I am really struck by your use of text in your work, and how that kind of relates to what you were saying about in using sign, how important the face is, how important gesture is outside of just the word making. And how that kind of comes across in your use of text a lot of times, that there's this sort of, it reverberates with how much it's not saying, or how well it complements a lot of your drawings. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you think through when you use text in your work, and how it relates.
Text is really how I communicate on a daily basis. I text, send emails. For people who don't know sign language, we'll text back and forth on our iPhones. So text is the nicest middle ground that I can have to communicate with someone a non-signer. And it's a nice neutral middle ground too. And so that's the reason why I use it a lot in my work.
Great.
Book? You're going to talk about your book, Barbara?
Oh, right, okay. We can go 2 more slides. Let's see, 1 more slide. Next one, okay. So I just had a book come out a week and a half ago, and I wasn't going to plug it, but I am now. So anyway, Phaidon has published it, and it's really a history of media. It's a quasi-memoir, so it's really from very personal experience of being a curator at MoMA and creating the video exhibition program and collection, and working with all kinds of amazing people. So through my career, the last show I did was the sound art show with Christine included. So I have a website also. It's hard if you read it, but it's barbaralondon.net. And I've got all of my press releases from every exhibition, every article I ever wrote. It's got lots and lots of information if you're interested in the field. I also did one of the first sound art shows in the United States, 1980. Guess what it was called? Sound art. So it's also there. So thank you for asking, and thank you so much for being a great audience and fantastic signers and a great artist, Christine.
Thank you for having me here, and thank you, Eyebeam. Thank you for interpreters working today. Thank you, everyone.